It's a well-known phenomenon that companies that were once the leaders in their industry and they were very successful, sometimes a number of years later find themselves in trouble. We have classic examples of IBM and so on, but we've recently seen it with Eastman Kodak or Nokia. Once leaders in their industry, a few years later in trouble because they didn't initiate change and didn't catch up with the change in their industry. We often blame this on the company and we say, well, they have become rigid or arrogant or whatever. But what my good friend and former PhD student, now a professor at Yale, Amandino D, and I discovered is that it's often not only due to themselves. There is something which we labeled contextual inertia. Their context is holding them back, and let me explain that. We did a big project on the market for champagne grapes. So champagne houses that make the sparkling wine have to buy the grapes from grape suppliers, grape growers. And we found that these grape growers sort of punish champagne houses for introducing change in the industry that they don't quite like. For example, if these houses set up foreign subsidiaries or acquire vineyards for themselves. And the way they punish them is by starting to charge them higher prices for the grapes. They punish them by charging higher prices for the necessary raw materials. But what we also found out is that they punished some houses more than others. In fact, they punished relative outsiders, new houses, houses that are managed by a CEO who's not from Champagne, and so on. They punished those outsiders relatively more. Meaning that in fact these outsiders to the industry found it more difficult to initiate change. And that's what we call contextual inertia. You still have partners that you need to work with in this industry, and if they punish you for trying to introduce change in this industry, it becomes very difficult to do this because you need your supply of grapes. And the second observation that we had is that in fact we often say, oh, it's the insiders who do not initiate the change, it has to be outsiders. But in fact, we often don't see that. We see that also the outsiders struggle with initiating change. Well, that's because they get even more punished by the necessary partners in this industry. So even making it for outsiders even more difficult to initiate this change. And that's what we mean with contextual inertia. And paradoxically, that's often even stronger for firms that are newcomers in the business.